Hey folks, today I wanted to give you guys a few quick tips about how to generate ideas for a piece of writing. This is stuff that you can use both to start a new piece of writing and to help expand what you've already written. The idea is anytime you need to get more onto the page, to find more to say about something, these are tools that you can use. There are two of them and they're both really simple and really powerful. The first one is called invisible writing. It works like this. Assuming you're doing this on a computer, there are lots of different ways to do it. But the technique is pretty simple. First, open up a new Word document or whatever you're using. I'll use Pages because I'm using a Mac. Get ready to type. So click within the boundaries of the document so that as soon as you start typing, words are going to come out onto the page. Set a timer for 5 minutes. And then here's the magical part of this technique. Turn off your screen. If you can't turn off your screen, there are a lot of ways to do this, like I said. Another way to do it is to set your font color to white, which is what I'm going to be doing in my little example here. Worst case scenario, close your eyes. I do that all the time. Then, your job is to type until your timer goes off. Let me show you how this works. So you'll see I have a new Word document here. I'll set my font to white, and then I'll set a timer for myself. And then I'm just going to start typing. You'll notice as soon as my cursor starts moving, you don't see anything other than the cursor moving. I'm going to speed this up so that you're not watching me move the cursor slowly for 5 minutes. During this time, while you're typing, your job is just to keep that cursor moving. See that little red squiggle that just popped up there? That's a place where I misspelled something. What did I misspell? I have no idea, because I can't see what I'm writing. That's the whole point of this exercise. What happens when we usually write is we obviously focus on what we've written. It tends to be difficult to ignore mistakes, oversights, confusing statements that we've made. If we misspell something, if we get that red or green squiggle from Microsoft Word, we immediately want to go back and fix it. That is to say, we focus on getting our sentences right. And as a result, we tend to constrict our ideas somewhat. We don't allow ourselves to relax and just let the ideas come out on the page. This is what invisible writing does for us. Because I can't see what I'm typing, I don't know when I've spelled something wrong. I don't know when I've said something that doesn't make sense. I lose track of my thoughts sometimes. You'll notice from time to time, I'll hit enter a few times. If I run into the end of an idea and I don't know where I was going, I just hit enter a couple of times and start over or try to express myself better. If my train of thought changes or if my ideas wander, if I come into something new, I just hit enter and keep going. The whole point is just to keep that cursor moving. You may or may not type as fast as I do. And if you don't like writing on the computer, there are other things that you can do too. One easy way to do this without using a computer is to use a notebook and write with the notebook mostly closed so that you can't see what your hand is doing underneath. And then just keep your fingers moving. The whole idea is to write without judgment, to write without being critical or even really being aware of what's coming out. When I first learned this technique, the very serious seeming English professor who taught it to me stopped in the middle of her writing about some question about literature to say, blah, 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 I wonder what I'm going to have for lunch, I don't know what to say, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, here's another thing about the question. Just by moving that cursor, or just by moving our pens, we're going to push ourselves to be more effective in getting ideas out of our heads and onto the page, because the ideas are all that we're going to have. This is a technique that essentially allows you to think on paper. So what I end up with is mostly a mess. Lots of squiggly lines, sentences and paragraphs that don't make a whole lot of sense. But lots of ideas. This is obviously not something that I'm ready to copy and paste into a piece of writing, let alone format and turn in. Obviously, this is not something that I should turn in. But it's gotten out some ideas, and it's helped me figure out some things that maybe I had to say that I didn't really know that I had to say before. And what allowed me to do this is the fact that I couldn't see or correct any of the mistakes that I had made. All those squiggles are still there because I wasn't able to go back and correct things. I was only able to move forward. So this is a good way to get started. But what if we have something that we've already written and we want to figure out how to expand on it? Here's the second technique. Here's our second technique for generating ideas. It's called looping, and it's just as easy as invisible writing. This is something that you can do with something that you've already written. It doesn't matter what. In the context of our class, you might start with the piece of invisible writing that you just did. You might start with a previous draft of your writing project. You can start with something you've already got at any stage in the process. This is a technique for expanding and developing something that you've already written. And simply, what you do is you find the most interesting, important, or complicated idea in the piece that you've already written. Set a timer for yourself and write for 5 minutes about just that idea. So the first thing I'm going to do is find an idea I think is important. In this case, the idea that the way that we plan and direct our lives is affected by what we think is going to happen to us. Maybe that's something I think I can expand and develop on. I'm going to make a line here, set a timer, and again, I'm going to make myself write for 5 minutes. You'll notice here that I start to write and I end up, as I said, getting fixated on the sentences, on the spelling, on the fact that this doesn't make sense. So, I give up. Invisible writing and looping work really well together, and in fact, I found myself, without even intending to, using invisible writing to help me get this second stage of my looping down. But the same idea applies. I'm just letting myself think out loud, or think on paper, about that one idea sitting there in its messy purple glory. We don't need to watch me type this whole time, so I'm going to cut ahead to what I end up with and show you the next step. So we've written for 5 minutes about our one idea. The next step is why they call this looping. Repeat recursively. That is to say, go back to step 1. You've just written something new. Take what you just wrote, find the most important, interesting, or complicated idea in that passage, and write for 5 minutes about just that new idea. So you'll notice what I do next is the same thing. I find an idea in what I've just written, highlight it for myself, draw a line, and this time I have the sense to start out invisible writing. The nice thing about this is that it can go on indefinitely. For as long as I want or need, I can continue finding new ideas to expand on. The more you say, the more you'll find to say. You can do this with all kinds of stuff. Like I said, you can do this to expand something you've already written. So if you're starting with phase 2 and trying to figure out how to make it longer, or if you've finished up phase 3 and you realize that you only have 5 pages and you need 8, this is an easy technique to find some spots in your paper where you could expand or develop. We can do this with our first responses to readings. We can read something, write a couple of notes about it, go back through and figure out what we want to say or what we want to expand upon. This is a technique for building and developing our writing, and it's really easy to expand what we've written using these two techniques together. Thanks for watching.